Welcome everyone to our last Lunch and Learn for Scajaquada September. It's been an amazing month. So many great opportunities for volunteers to get involved, and just really excited that I'm able to close out this awesome month as we focus on Scajaquada Creek with this presentation. So today we're just going to be going through really how you can advocate for Scajaquada today. So I'll just go over kind of Scajaquada Creek and the sweep overview. So we have a cleanup in the fall focusing on the creek, just talk about why we need data, and then how you can help us collect that data with solo sweeps and making it count with Clean Swell, and then a policy spotlight. So just thinking about some successful policies that have helped to protect our waterways here in the region, throughout the state, and even throughout the country. Before all that, I would like to do a land acknowledgement and acknowledge that we are on traditional Haudenosaunee land, and we are very grateful to live here and be in such a special place in the world, and want to acknowledge that this land was stolen from the Haudenosaunee people, and they are the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. And I truly believe they are the teachers that we need right now as we face the climate crisis and really working to protect our water here in Western New York. So pretty sure most of you here know who Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper is, but just briefly, our mission is to protect and restore our water. So we do that by restoring the health of ecosystems through some of our programs where we're really looking at the shoreline and trying to revitalize the health. We inspire economic growth and community engagement through opportunities just like this, and then connecting folks to water, of course, through our tours and also our cleanups, which we'll be talking about today. So one message I think is really important that we highlight is that New York is a Great Lakes state. So sometimes we forget that. We do have the ocean on our coastlines to the east of us, but we really are in a special spot here in Western New York. We have not one, but two Great Lakes. And the work that Waterkeeper does is focused on the Niagara River watershed. So that's what is highlighted right here. Another thing I like to remind folks, what is a watershed? Jill mentioned this in her Lunch and Learn as well, because I think when we hear the word watershed, we always think about just the water, but it really does encompass not just the streams and rivers that all connect to a shared water body, but also the land. And so again, this is just a snapshot of where Waterkeeper focuses our work on. And today we're going to definitely be focusing on the Scajaquada Creek watershed, but I think this just gives a snapshot to remind us that, you know, the work that happens is to protect the water, but it is also focused on what we do on land as well, which all impacts our water quality throughout the region. So this is a Waterkeeper map of the Scajaquada Creek watershed. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And the creek is 13 miles long, 29 square miles, with the headwaters starting in Lancaster. Then that travels through Depew into Cheektowaga, and then the mouth is in the city of Buffalo on Niagara Street. So this map is giving you just kind of that snapshot and looking at different opportunities. You can see the green with blue dotted line that says the daylighting opportunity. What does that mean? Well, the creek is actually buried for more than half of its entirety. So I found a different map that really just kind of points out exactly where those buried portions of the creek are. And that really is just a testament to how degraded this creek is, where most of it really is in channelized areas and underneath the ground. Jill does a really great synopsis of kind of all of these pieces, but I think this map just kind of shows you quickly visually where those spaces are, where the creek actually goes underground. One surprising fact many of you may not know, maybe folks on this call might, but others, is that it's actually buried right underneath the Walden Galleria. And there's spots all around the mall that you can kind of see where it's peeking out. And then again, it comes up and then it goes back down again after Cheektowaga Town Park one of the sites that we host a cleanups at, and it goes down for literally most of the center of the creek, daylighting again at Forest Lawn Cemetery, where we have a restoration project there as well. So Scajaquada has obviously faced so many different challenges, as many of you know, which is why you might be here today to think about what are some other ways that we can protect this degraded creek that has so much incredible history, which I won't dive into today, but I really do encourage you to check out our website. We have so many great stories and resources about the history of Scajaquada Creek and the revitalization efforts leading up to today. One thing I will note, even most recently, we've heard of, I put legacy of contamination on the slide because most recently there's been coal tar ash discovered in a small part of the creek towards the mouth of Scajaquada. So that is where, as degraded as that space is, it's actually where my story with doing waterway cleanup started, was at the mouth of Scajaquada. It was my first cleanup almost 8 years ago. And really, I got to see firsthand, the challenges that face not just Scajaquada, but many of our creeks, but particularly there. So the picture on the right is really how I was first introduced to Scajaquada. And unfortunately, this photograph is not old. It was taken last year at our Scajaquada Sweep. Because there are several what are called CSOs that empty out there. So they're combined sewer overflows. So if any of you follow Waterkeeper work, you know that we definitely want to make sure folks know exactly where those CSOs are. So there are 5 along Scajaquada Creek, and then that empties out into Black Rock Canal, which eventually flows into the Niagara River, which there are several other in Black Rock Canal. So this area is incredibly degraded. And so cleanups are so important, just thinking about the things that we can remove from the shoreline. Contamination that has been around for a long time, maybe not so much. We'll leave that to the Department of Environmental Conservation, who is working on cleaning up that area, which is what you see on the left there. And then in the center, there's a lot of illegal dumping that goes on in other pockets throughout the city, but this mouth of Scajaquada area underneath the thruway is one that is hit very hard. So our cleanups are so important when it comes to removing these items before they get to contaminate the waterway, which already faces so many issues. So kind of turning to a more happy note here with the Scajaquada Sweep that just happened on the 1st of September. We had such a great turnout. Thank you for everybody who came out to pick up litter. I know we had to kind of change the game a little bit due to the contamination found at the mouth, but everyone showed up and worked really hard, and we collected such great data. Big shout out to my site captains at the TOPS area. Debbie, Eileen, and Anna, you guys were awesome helping out with Nye and I. And so in total, yeah, we had 68 volunteers between that site and Peter Street. Wendy Patterson was over there with a group, and we removed over 600 pounds of trash in just that small 3-hour effort, which included 12 tires as well. And so it was just really impressive. Another shout out to CBW Community Beer Works. They donated their grain bags, which we used and really saved even more plastic from being generated from that event. So thank you to everyone for that. And again, we really focused on data collection as we have been over the last couple of years. But during September is actually part of the International Coastal Cleanup, which was really where we started collecting data on very specific types of litter started back in 2015, and kind of has been the one event throughout the year where we make sure we know exactly what types of litter we're picking up to kind of add to that global database. So what has the litter, the litter basically that the data we've been collecting on the litter we pick up, what has that story been telling us over the last few years? So looking at not just specific types of litter, but the overall pounds of trash that we're collecting, I looked at our spring sweep numbers this year to really see, okay, what is that story saying? And the story is saying, on average, we are collecting the same amount of trash every single year for this big giant event, between 40 and 50 sites we visit for the spring sweep. So much more extensive than just focusing on one watershed. But ultimately what we're seeing is it's the same amount of trash. It continues to pile up. The same amount is collected by volunteers on average. And although we're making that incredible immediate impact, by removing that from getting into the waterways, how can we do more? What else can we do to advocate for our water other than just kind of removing the plastics from the shoreline? I say plastics because this slide I think is important to just show what is that specific types of litter. So you looked at the kind of the big picture of all this giant how many pounds, 15 tons of waste is being picked up for this event. But then we kind of zoomed in and looked at last year's Scajaquada Sweep because that's where we were really collecting the specific type of litter data. And what we found is probably not too surprising. It's plastic. It's mostly all plastic. So as you can see here, plastic pieces, so that can be like anything. Could be even tiny trash in that category. But then looking down the line, I mean, it is all plastic. And I think it's really important to highlight that when we're thinking about litter data, because plastic really is connected to kind of a much larger problem, or it's driving a much larger problem that I'm sure we've all heard before, and that's the climate crisis. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but when we think about these specific types of litter, I think there are so many ways that this data could be used in advocacy efforts. One way I like to think how people start thinking the importance of data is thinking about specific types of trash that they would want to see eliminated from the waste stream. So this spring, I asked our amazing site captains to fill out a survey. And in that survey, I asked, what's one thing that you just want to stop seeing? Most of these folks have been out on the water and shorelines with us collecting litter every single year. So they know what they continue to see over and over again. And so these were some of the things that popped up more than one time. So coffee cups, styrofoam, fishing line, single-use plastics, plastic bags. So what's great about some of these in here, specifically if you think about styrofoam or more polystyrofoam, so what we used to get in when we would order takeout, there is a New York State law that has banned that. Same with plastic bags. So that's really exciting, just thinking about these are the things we want to remove from the waste stream. And in fact, we can advocate to do so through campaigning, through volunteering, through policy, essentially. Fishing line, I will do a little shout out because it is one incredibly harmful piece of debris that we find along our shorelines. And there is a program that we have partnered with to help folks adopt fishing line bins. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me. So I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but I think I'll give you a kind of a synopsis of what I'm trying to show you in this. And really that's connecting the plastic crisis with the climate crisis. Our friends at Beyond Plastics came out with a really great report, I believe last year, called Plastics, the New Coal, or I might be saying that wrong, the New Coal, Plastics and Climate Change. And essentially what it was outlining is the fact that we have not recycled most of the plastic that's ever been created. And the plastic industry here in the United States is actually driving climate change. It's kind of taken over because they use coal in plastic production, right? So there's so many things that I think there are myths around what recycling is, how it works. And the truth is, it's done a pretty poor job in recycling the products that we think are being recycled. So some big numbers here when we think about, we incinerate 32 million tons of plastic annually, okay? And some of those other pieces, if you've ever think about the bottom of your recycling items, right? But there's those magical numbers on the bottom that we don't always know what those mean. Well, in some of the research that I've been looking at, number ones and twos, those are the ones that really tend to get recycled because they're made of better quality plastics, where a lot of the other numbers are not. And so they're not really useful when it comes to creating new similarly used products. And then just thinking about our health, there really isn't enough studies out there right now looking at plastics and human health to make any kind of big, bold statements, but they are seeing that plastics can impact our health. And how long, I guess, is my question to you, is how long do we want to wait before we see really what these impacts are, right? Like, we know that there's impacts. Like, let's try to get it out of our bodies, out of our ecosystems, and start thinking about alternatives. And so that's why, again, bringing it back to why collecting data is really important, is for these advocacy efforts, to show either how we are seeing one particular type of product in one area, or maybe we're looking at a brand. We're not quite there yet with our data collection, but I think when we think about volunteer efforts picking up data, or I'm sorry, picking up litter, how can we really increase that impact beyond just that one day that you volunteered your time? And I think that is through data collection. So when we think about how you can do that on your own time, we can't hold cleanups every single day, as much as I would love to do so. We just can't do it. But that's why I think Solo Sweeps was a really incredible program, unfortunately coming out of the pandemic, but really filling a need, right? Because we can't be out there every single day. And even in those winter months, right, litter is still piling up. There's still different ways that it's getting into our ecosystem. And so Solo Sweeps, I think, is a great, simple way that you can volunteer your time and then track those efforts. So using what we call the Clean Swell application created by the Ocean Conservancy. And then all of that information is stored on the largest litter database in the world. And so why is there a need for this litter data here in the Great Lakes region? That's what I'm going to talk about. But first, let's start with Solo Sweep. So what is a Solo Sweep? It's a cleanup by one person or a small group that you can do anywhere, anytime, that's convenient for you. And the most important part of that is not just picking up the litter and throwing it out, but actually tracking what you found, whether that's specific items that you found, or maybe it's just the total weight. Both of those, that data is really incredibly valuable for our work and for others who are advocating for less litter in our environment. So we actually started in the spring, and it's something we're kind of piloting and hopefully planning to grow in the next year, is the Solo Sweep Pledge. So really trying to highlight the work that folks have been doing all summer. So I took a couple of quotes from our pledge because I thought they were just really like inspiring and awesome as to why folks are pledging, because it's not like, they're doing this because they know that there's a lot of litter in our environment, right? And they want to make the world a cleaner and greener place. So when you sign the Solo Sweep Pledge, you commit to remove litter within our watershed this year, collect that data, and then share your experience with others. So that was kind of this piece here. And I just want to give a shout out to some solo sweepers that have been supporting our work all along. Debbie Whalen, she's solo sweeping all the time, and Dawn Cody, who I have her quote here, that she cashes in, trash out. I love that little phrase, because think about how many of us are, out on hikes, out enjoying nature, and we pick up litter, right? Imagine you could double that impact. You're not just doing it to clean that one area in that one moment, but then those efforts are magnified and they go beyond that day when you track it with Clean Swell. And make sure you use BNW in your group name, which I'll talk all about. I'm going to just do a super brief high-level overview here of using Clean Swell. It's incredibly easy. They just updated it this spring. So there's 3 options. Once you download the app, super easy, open it up, and you have these 3 options here. The trash collection device, we're not going to use that one. You're going to be focusing on starting a new cleanup or recording a past cleanup. So when you start a new cleanup, that's the one basically where you're going to go through and actually pick out exactly what type of litter you're collecting, whereas recording a past one, maybe you picked up a small bag of trash with your family over the weekend, but you didn't count everything, but you want to make it count. You can record it as a past cleanup. So really the most important thing I'm trying to show you on this screen is your group name. So when we're looking at how many folks were out there in the Niagara River watershed in the last few months, I go in and I look for BNW when I look on the Tides database. So that's what this is outlining. Instead of just saying your name, please include that so we can track your efforts much easily through Tides. And then on the right, again, if you just picked up a bag and you didn't record the types of litter, that's still valuable data. So there's an option to do that. And then it's super easy. You go in, very user-friendly. You click on the most common items, let's say, that's the middle one, where you're going to see everything that you see all the time, like bottle caps, cigarette butts, plastic bags, that kind of stuff. And then on the right, you have all these different categories that you might not see as often. So like illegal dumping. So you're going to have tires in there, construction materials, personal hygiene. I think that's a big one for our region, right? Because we have a lot of combined sewer overflows. And again, I don't think I defined it specifically in the beginning, but that means when we have rain events over a half an inch, we have some untreated sewage water going into our fresh water. So another thing to keep in mind when we're advocating. And then of course, this is just a fun trick that if you really are getting into it and you find 50 cigarette butts, you don't have to sit there and tap 50 times. I promise. You can hold down whatever that item is and just put the number in. So they've made it incredibly easy to use. And we've actually been recognized as a leader in data collection here in our region. So when you open up the app, you actually see our logo right on there. If you're anywhere within our region, you'll see the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper logo, which is really cool. And then don't forget to finish the cleanup and of course add photos if you'd like. And so where does all this information go? Well, it goes to the TIDES database. So trash information and data for educations and solution. And I think this is just incredibly cool that we have had such an increase in data collection here in Western New York, but also throughout the Great Lakes region. We coordinate the Great Lakes cleanup. So that's with partners, again, in all 5 Great Lakes, even some of our friends in Canada. And we're really trying to advocate for this clean swell as being that central hub for our data, because there isn't a lot of Great Lakes data. You know, we hear so much about ocean plastic, right? We know about the ocean gyres. We know that it's causing, you know, massive issues for wildlife in the oceans, but it's causing issues here too. And I think when I think about all the volunteers who volunteer their time to pick up litter from our shoreline, I think, again, you're doubling that impact by actually showing that it has happened, right? And so check out TIDES if you're interested. It's an incredible resource. And Waterkeeper isn't the only one looking on here, right? We have policymakers, we have educators, we have nonprofit organizations, you know, elected officials. So this is a resource for folks who are looking for this type of data. So again, I kind of mentioned in the beginning, just thinking about different laws that and policies that have been supported by litter data. You know, we were so successful with this plastic bag ban in New York State. I know COVID kind of threw it off a little bit, but I think overall I am personally seeing a lot less plastic bags in our environment. Polystyrene, so that's the one that literally never breaks down, and very tiny, tiny harmful plastic pieces. So that has been banned in New York State. Many different municipal laws related to smoking, cigarettes, because cigarette butts are always the #1 thing that we pick up at our cleanups. And then kind of doing a throwback to the microbreed free waters. Now that's not necessarily connected to litter data, but I think, again, just kind of showing the power in policies by showing, you know, there was other scientists working on that effort, right, to show that these microbeads are pervading our environment and we need to do something about it. And so that law started here in New York State with advocates here, even regionally. We had a lot of leaders in the county, and now that's a national law. And then looking ahead, we have some proposed waste reductions policies. So if some of you were trained as a site captain in the spring, some of these slides might look familiar to you from the data stories and advocacy presentation I did. But these policies are still up for on the ballot. Well, not the ballot, excuse me, that's the wrong phrase, but they're out there for you to learn about and potentially advocate for, or maybe some of them need to be made better. So the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act is a huge federal legislation that kind of encompasses everything. It encompasses, you know, plastic bag bans, it encompasses different extended producer responsibilities. So that's kind of your big umbrella one that's being advocated for at the federal level. Then we have the extended producer responsibility. So there's actually been several passed out west, and there is one in New York State. Some advocates were trying to call for stronger regulations for that one last year, so it didn't pass. But I think it's definitely something we need here in New York State. And it's exactly what it sounds like, right? Let's hold these producers accountable, because I think the finger being pointed to individuals for the last 40 years has not really been successful. And then we have the Better Bottle Bill, which is, they haven't had an updated bottle bill here in New York State for decades. So this would be an amazing thing to pass, and that would allow for different things like wine bottles and Gatorade to actually get that 5 cents or even more. So those are some things that are state and federal wide. And then on the right, I just wanted to add some things kind of more related to general environmental protections, but water protections. So many of you might have heard PFAS, that word before, PFOAs, and these are what are called those forever chemicals. So we're seeing those a lot more in the news. And Governor Hochul has definitely been supportive of advocating for water protections and just thinking about how we can make them even stronger. So you have your maximum contaminant levels. So that means if it reaches a certain level of a specific type of PFAS, then that means folks will have to be notified via mail, whereas and then actual action has to be taken on those contamination levels. And then we also have our notification levels, which means if we see this type of chemical in our water, we just have to let people know, but we don't actually have to take any action. And when I say we, I mean the state. And so again, there's a lot more to learn there. I'm not an expert on that, but I do think it's important that we keep that on our radar. These are other chemicals coming from plastics and other types of litter that we're finding in our environment. So there's your connection there. And then just reminding folks this year that there is a proposition to protect clean air, water, and green jobs. So remember to learn more about that and flip over your ballot in November. This slide is really just to remind folks that, litter data isn't the only way we here at Waterkeeper collect, count, and advocate, right? So we have Nurdle Patrol, which is a program that focuses on the beginnings of plastic. So the small, teeny, tiny beads that actually get sent to different distributors to make whatever their plastic product is. We find those throughout our watershed. River Watch, so important. If you haven't checked that out, if you want to know where a CSO is, a combined sewer overflow in our region, go check that out. If you want to, see what the water quality is of, the Buffalo River, go check that out. All of our River Watch volunteers do such an amazing job collecting that information to share with the public. And then, like I mentioned, we have our bin program. So we partner with other folks to install Reel and Recycle cigarette butt bins. And more recently, we launched our C-bin program down at the Buffalo Harbor. So that is a trash trap device that we're piloting to see what we can collect just right along the shoreline. So litter data is not the only way we can advocate. And of course, you personally, how can you advocate right now? And I just kind of wanted to remind folks how powerful a letter is. So I know this letter isn't specific to Scajaquada Creek, but it is very much connected, right? Because all of the things I talked about in terms of plastic and litter impacting that waterway and many of ours. So I think writing a letter can be really powerful. Same with a phone call or meeting with your elected official. But you can't do that unless you know who your elected officials are. So if I know maybe not all of you live in the city of Buffalo, because I know there are 9 council districts there, but who is your council member? I like to start as local as possible, right? Especially when we're thinking about our waterways. And thinking about solutions to that, you have to have your elected officials on board and let them know what you care about, So thinking about if you do live within the Scajaquada Creek watershed, who is your elected official and do they know that you care about the revitalization of that waterway? And then of course your classic, petitions, right? If there's something very specific you want to advocate for, I've seen the success of petitions be really strong. And then of course, volunteering, right? And organizing. So I've been advocating for folks to be solo sweepers. So that's one way you can do that, and kind of organizing your friends, your family, your network of people to kind of know what these issues are and maybe join you. So there's still time to solo sweep. Although we're coming to an end of September, which is technically the International Coastal Cleanup Month, any efforts really through the next month are counted as all part of that International Coastal Cleanup effort. So there's still time, and there's plenty of different sites that need love along the watershed. And feel free to, again, check out our website. You'll see some of the places we've visited in the past, like Cheektowaga Town Park, for instance, which is like west of the Galleria Mall. So there's plenty of spots along the creek, and even where we did visit, unfortunately, by Tops and Delaware Park and the Jesse Kriegel Pathway, I'm sure they could use some extra love now. So if you're thinking about a spot, all of those will work. Please avoid the mouth of Scajaquada still. They're still doing cleanup efforts there. So please stay away from that spot from West Ave towards the mouth for safety. But otherwise, please get out there and let me know if you have any questions along the way. I'm here for you. And I left this last slide here. In Jill's presentation, she had mentioned there was an article in the Buffalo Courier, I want to say in like the 50s, and it basically was talking about the history of degradation that has occurred along Scajaquada Creek. And there was a phrase in that said, you know, the people came together and they decided that the creek must go. And, you know, you can't just, you know, poof, a creek gone, but they managed to, you know, bury it and hide it. And, you know, then later develop all sorts of throughway all over it, which you see on the bottom right there. The top right is where they were actually digging the creek into the ground on the east side where it is still buried. And so I think instead of the creek must go, my new phrase is the creek must thrive. And so on your left, you see actually in real life, that is the forest lawn restoration site that Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper led to really create a living shoreline there. And then on the bottom, you have the Scajaquada Corridor Coalition, which has done some incredible renderings that I encourage you to take a look at. And this one is a beautiful shot of what could potentially be by Buffalo State, and really connecting not just the students, but the entire community to the creek. So I think there's so much opportunity, and it's really up to us to come together, right? And share a vision that what we want to see for the creek, how we want to see it protected. So yeah, if you have any other ideas or follow-up questions, you can throw them in the chat right now. But I am at the end of my presentation, so thank you.